The sun was burning the skin off the world. It had to be at least 42 degrees out, and the heat shimmered off the red dirt like gasoline flames. Zeca Ramos gripped the steering wheel tighter, his palms sticky with sweat, eyes squinting against the glare of the afternoon light bouncing off the dusty windshield. He hadn't seen another soul in over an hour. Just his truck, the long, rattling road through Jalapão, and the relentless silence. He was 4 days into this haul Goiânia to Teresina grain in the back miles in his bones. Took a detour off the BR-153 because of a surprise checkpoint. He hated those. Too many questions, too many eyes. So now he was here bouncing along a road that barely existed, cutting through dry bushland and cracked plateaus that stretched wider than memory. The radio crackled out a half-dead sertanejo song. Zeca reached over and shut it off. The silence was better than the voices in his head. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. What bothered him wasn't hunger. It was the way his chest felt heavier than usual today. Maybe it was the heat. Maybe it was something else. The kind of weight that reminded you of everything you'd lost. He hadn't seen his own kids in 3 years. Last he heard, they were in Goiânia with their mother. She'd said she was done waiting for a man who only came home between loads and never stayed long enough to fix what was breaking. She wasn't wrong. Zeca hadn't known how to be both husband and roadman. He chose the road. And now the road was all he had. As the truck climbed a shallow hill, something sharp cut through the dust. A shape. 2 shapes. Zeca leaned forward. At first he thought it was trash. Maybe a couple of bags someone had dumped. Then the shapes moved just barely. He hit the brakes. The truck groaned and skidded in the red dirt, throwing a cloud of dust around him. His heart jumped into his throat. He grabbed the rear view, instinctively, nobody behind. There hadn't been for miles. Just him and the sky. He stared through the haze as the dust settled. A bench. A broken, crooked wooden bench by the side of the road. And on it, 2 children. Zeca didn't move for a long moment. His hands were still on the wheel, frozen. The kids weren't looking at him. They just sat there, legs dangling, backs hunched like they were trying to fold into themselves. A ragged cloth bag sat beside them. A torn cardboard suitcase. An empty water bottle rolling in the dirt. He shut off the engine. The silence that followed was thick, unnatural. Even the insects had gone quiet. Zeca opened the door slowly and climbed down, boots crunching into the powdery earth. The heat slapped him full in the face, baking the back of his neck, burning through his shirt. He walked cautiously, like approaching a deer that might bolt. The closer he got, the younger they looked. The boy couldn't have been older than 9. Tall for his age, but thin, too thin. Dirty shorts, shirt hanging off his bony frame, dust caked into the lines of his arms and neck. He stood up when Zeca got within 10 feet and stepped in front of the smaller figure. Protective. The little one, a girl, stayed on the bench. 5, maybe 6. Hair matted with sweat and dirt. A torn dress. She was holding something close to her chest. A cloth wrapped tight in her small arms, like it was her whole world. Zeca stopped. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, voice low, rough. "Só tô tentando entender." The boy said nothing, just stared, jaw tight, eyes steady. But Zeca saw the tremble in his hands. "Cadê os pais de vocês?" Zeca asked, switching to Portuguese instinctively. The boy's mouth barely moved. "Foram ali. Já voltam." Zeca looked around. There was nothing. No house, no turnoff, no signs of people. Just red dirt, scorched grass, twisted trees, and heat waves stretching into infinity. He turned back. "Ali onde menino." The boy didn't answer. Zeca exhaled through his nose. He took a step forward, then crouched down slowly, letting the trucker's knees crack like dry wood. Listen. You don't have to talk, but I'm not leaving you here. Still nothing. The girl hadn't looked up once, just clutched the cloth tighter. Zeka looked at the ground beside the bench. Tire marks. Fresh. Deep grooves like someone had peeled out in a hurry. His stomach turned. They weren't waiting. They'd been left. A memory rushed in him at 7, sitting on the front steps of a house that didn't belong to them anymore, waiting for a father who'd gone out for cigarettes and never came back. He could still feel the sting in his chest, the heat, the taste of silence. He stood up. You've eaten today? The boy hesitated, then shook his head. Zeka nodded once and walked back to the truck. He grabbed a bottle of water, a stale bread roll, and 2 packets of cookies from the cab. His hands were shaking slightly. When he returned, he knelt again and offered the food. The boy stepped forward slowly, still shielding the girl. Took the water first, then the food. Gave it all to her. She needs it more, he muttered. Zeka didn't argue. They ate like they hadn't eaten in days. The girl spilled half the water down her front, trying to drink. The boy tore 1 cookie in half and pushed the bigger piece into her hand. She tried to give it back. They whispered a quiet tug-of-war, each wanting the other to have more. Zeka swallowed hard. He took off his cap and wiped his forehead. Qual é seu nome? The boy looked up, unsure. Eu sou o Zeka, he offered. Zeka Ramos, caminhoneiro. The boy looked at him for a long time. Then quietly, João. Zeka looked at the girl. E ela. João hesitated, then leaned in, whispered something in her ear. She shook her head. He tried again. After a pause, she raised her eyes and said so soft, Zeka almost didn't hear it, Rosa. Her voice was like a breeze in a dry forest. Zeka stood, brushed his knees. Certo. João. Rosa. Agora vocês vêm comigo. João's eyes flashed with panic. Vai deixar a gente onde comigo, Zeka said simply. Até a gente saber o que fazer. Rosa clutched her bundle tighter, eyes locked on Zeka as if trying to decide whether he was real. João didn't move. I swear, Zeka said, hand on his chest. Enquanto eu respirar, vocês não ficam mais aqui. They stared at him, and then slowly, João nodded. Zeka helped them climb into the cab. João first, then Rosa, who needed a boost. She sat curled against the door arms around her bundle. João sat between them, stiff alert. Zeka closed the door gently. He looked out at the bench, still crooked, still broken, standing crooked in the dirt. He fired up the engine. And for the first time in a long while, the weight in Zeka Ramos's chest felt like something he was meant to carry. Sometimes the saddest lie is the one you told yourself when you were a kid. The truck rumbled back to life, groaning beneath the weight of both its load and the silence inside the cab. Zeka kept his eyes on the road, one hand loose on the wheel, the other resting on his thigh. Dust spiraled in the side mirrors like ghosts chasing after them. The sun had started to dip, turning the sky the color of rust and old peaches. The heat was still there, clinging to everything, but now it came with a wind, hot, dry, and filled with grit. João sat rigid in the middle seat, arms tucked tight to his body, like he was bracing for impact. Rosa leaned against the door, her face pressed into the rolled-up cloth bundle she hadn't let go of since she'd climbed in. Zeka had watched her out of the corner of his eye. She didn't sleep. She didn't even blink much, just held on to that bundle like the whole world was inside it. They hadn't spoken since pulling away from the bench. Zeka didn't push. He knew how silence could be armor. The road narrowed again, winding through scrub trees and burnt grass. He downshifted to navigate a rut, the truck bouncing hard on the uneven terrain. Joao's hand shot out instinctively, bracing his sister against the jolt. She didn't react, just kept holding that cloth tight to her chest. "You got a Grandma?" Zeka asked, his voice low. Joao flinched at the sound like he wasn't expecting to be addressed. "Or Tio Tia? Someone." The boy shook his head. "So tinga amai." Zeka waited. When nothing else came, he nodded and let it drop. For now. They drove another 20 minutes in that quiet broken only by the sound of tires grinding dirt and the occasional cough of the engine working too hard in the heat. The fuel gauge hovered just above a quarter tank. Zeka figured he could make it to Materos by nightfall if the road stayed open and his luck held. Big if. He reached for the thermos by his side, unscrewed the lid with one hand, and offered it across the seat. "It's just water. Still cold." Joao hesitated, then took it, and passed it to Rosa first. She sipped like it was something sacred. Zeka watched her small throat move as she swallowed, then gave it back to her brother without a word. Zeka gave her a soft nod. "Smart girl." Joao took a longer swig and handed the thermos back. "Obrigado," he muttered. "No need." They drove a little more. "What was your mom like?" Zeka asked, not because he wanted to poke at wounds, but because sometimes talking loosened something stuck inside. And stuck kids didn't heal. Joao's eyes stayed forward. Quiet. She liked cantaroller when ella lavava rupa. Zeka nodded. "That's a good thing to remember." She stopped depois que casou com ele. Zeka didn't need to ask who he was. Ademir João added anyway, as if the name itself needed to be said aloud to be real. Ele não gostava de gente. Zeka stayed quiet, eyes forward, hands steady on the wheel. "He said we were despesa, that we ruined everything, that we took her away from him." Joao's voice was flat, but Zeka could hear the tightness at the edges. "Sometimes he'd lock us outside, or make us sleep without janta." Zeka's jaw tightened. "He said we had to learn a lesson, that the world doesn't care about criança fraca." "He was wrong," Zeka said. Joao glanced at him, skeptical. Zeka kept his eyes on the road. "I've known plenty of men like him. They talk big, beat little. The world's full of them. Doesn't mean they're right." Joao didn't respond. But the silence felt different now, less like fear, more like listening. The road dipped suddenly, a sharp turn, skirting a shallow ravine. Zeka shifted down again, the truck groaning in protest. "Why'd you stop?" Joao asked the question, cutting through the quiet like a blade. Zeka blinked. "What, back there?" "On the road. You didn't know us. You could have just passed." Zeka let out a long breath through his nose. "I almost did." He didn't say more. Rosa shifted, finally lifting her head from the bundle. Her voice came out small, almost like breath. "Why didn't you?" Zeka kept both hands on the wheel. "Because someone should have stopped for me once. And no one did." That shut the cab down again, but this time the silence wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. The sun kept falling. Long shadows stretched over the dirt, turning every tree into a twisted shape with a secret. Zeka saw a sign ahead, bent, rusted, barely legible. Materos. Kuktin kolum. He could make it. "All right," he said, adjusting his grip on the wheel. "We'll find a place to eat something quiet. Maybe get you all cleaned up." Rosa finally looked at him directly. Her eyes were huge and dark, still rimmed with dust, but alert. "Are we going home?" Zeka glanced at her, then back at the road. "No," he said honestly. But we're not going back there either. João swallowed. Zeka could see it, he was trying not to cry. You don't have to be strong right now, Zeka said softer. That's not your job. Not today. João shook his head. If I don't, who's going to take care of her? Zeka's grip on the wheel tightened. You're not alone anymore, he said. You hear me, João? Not anymore. João nodded once, sharp and fast, not quite believing but wanting to. They drove on in the dusk. The light thinned and the trees thickened, casting long fingers across the road. In the back of his mind, Zeka was already planning, find a restaurant, fill their bellies, get gas, then figure out where to sleep. He didn't hear the low hum of an engine behind them until it was almost too late. Far back through the dust, 2 headlights. Zeka checked his side mirror. The vehicle wasn't close yet. Just there. Following. He watched it for a long second, then glanced down at Rosa's bundle. She clutched it tighter. He didn't ask what was inside. Not yet. But the hairs on his arms were standing up. Zeka pressed the accelerator a little harder, his jaw tightening. Something wasn't right. And whatever it was, it had found them again. Promises to kids are serious things, especially when the whole world already broke them before you showed up. The headlights were still there. Zeka watched them stretch and blur in the side mirror just far enough to not look like a threat, yet too steady to be random. On these back roads, cars didn't tailgate. Either you passed or you vanished in the dust. But this one, it was hanging on like it had a purpose. Zeka kept his face, calm voice even. We're almost to Materos. Just a few more minutes. João didn't speak. He'd seen the lights too. The boy had shifted to where he could glance through the side mirror without being obvious. Rosa, still curled against the door, was nearly asleep, thumb in her mouth, cloth bundle in her lap. Zeka turned off the main road into the edge of the town, a string of modest houses, a small church, and a couple of open eateries. A soft yellow glow from streetlights lit the narrow pavement, and the noise of tires against gravel finally shifted to something more solid. The truck rolled into a dusty lot beside a small building with a fading hand-painted sign, Comida Casera, Dona Belinha. There were 3 tables inside dim lights, and the smell of real food thick in the air. A place with no questions, just full plates. The truck behind them didn't follow. Zeka watched it cruise past in the rear view, never slowing. Just one man behind the wheel, dark cap, low windows rolled up. He didn't even glance over. It could have been nothing. Could have been everything. He cut the engine. Come on, he said. Let's eat. Inside the restaurant, the heat from the kitchen mixed with the smell of garlic and onions in oil. A radio played soft Foro. An older woman wiped down a table. She smiled at Zeka without recognition, just the smile of someone raised to be kind. João helped Rosa out of the truck. She stumbled once and he caught her gently like he'd done it 100 times. Zeka waited by the door, keeping his posture relaxed, eyes scanning the street through the window. They picked the back table closest to the kitchen, and with a clear view of the entrance. Habit. Zeka always sat where he could see trouble coming. The kids sat quietly. Rosa placed her bundle on the table beside her plate, one small hand resting on top. She watched the room like an animal in unfamiliar woods ready to bolt. Dona Belinha brought menus and 2 glasses of water. Don't worry, Dona Zeka said. We'll take whatever you've got hot. Got some rice beans, carne de sol with macaxira, and a fresh pot of suco de caju. Perfect. João drank the water too fast and had to cough it down. Zeka passed him his glass without a word. The boy took it with a nod. Rosa didn't drink until João took the first bite of the bread Dona Belina left as a starter. Only then did she touch anything. Zeca took mental note of that. She wouldn't act without permission. Trust was still a foreign language in her mouth. They ate in near silence. The food was good, too good for them to talk through it. João ate like he'd learned to chew slowly even when he was starving. Rosa shared each bite, watching João's face after every spoonful, waiting for a sign it was okay to have more. Zeca didn't rush. He wasn't sure what came after the food, but he knew this was the part that mattered. The quiet, the warmth, the normal. He chewed his last bite and leaned back. "You two ever been to Teresina?" João looked up slowly. "No." "Well, I gotta make a delivery there. Grain for the co-op. We'll go slow. Make stops if we need to. After that..." Zeca paused, choosing words carefully. "We'll figure it out together." Neither responded. Rosa traced circles on the table with her fingertip. Zeca studied her for a moment. "What's in the bundle, pequena?" Her hand froze. João stiffened. "It's hers," he said quickly. I'm not taking it. Just asking." Rosa looked at João, then slowly pulled the bundle closer. Her small fingers gripped the fabric like it was flesh and bone. "You keeping something important?" Zeca asked again, softer. She gave the faintest nod. Zeca didn't press. "Good. Hold it close then." They sat a while longer before Rosa leaned against João's shoulder and closed her eyes. Zeca stood paid in cash at the counter and thanked Dona Belina for the food. She looked at the children as he turned away. "São seus no," he said. "Mas agora são minha responsabilidade." She didn't ask anything else, just nodded like she understood what kind of promise that was. Back in the truck, Zeca boosted Rosa up first. She was half asleep, barely responding. João climbed in after and pulled her close. Zeca settled in behind the wheel and started the engine. As they pulled onto the road leading out of Mateiros, he checked his mirrors again. Nothing. But that didn't mean anything. They were a few kilometers out past the last streetlight when Rosa stirred. "Mozzo," she said, voice fragile. "Pode falar Rosa. I didn't mean to steal." Zeca blinked. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer. Just reached into her bundle and pulled it open with shaking hands. Inside the folds of the cloth, dirty, torn, and frayed, was an envelope. Zeca looked at it. Rosa stared at her lap. It was under the bed. In their room. "I saw it when I was looking for my teddy." João didn't say a word. Zeca took the envelope and opened it. Cash. Stacks of it. Mixed bills. Mostly hundreds and fifties. Sloppy rubber-banded bundles. A few were marked with something like ink or powder residue. Zeca whistled low. "How much you think is in here, I don't know," Rosa whispered. "But it was hidden. I thought maybe we'd need it." Zeca closed the envelope and exhaled hard through his nose. "You might have just saved your lives," he muttered. João finally spoke. "You think that's why he left us?" Zeca didn't answer. The night pressed in around the cab like a second skin. The wind outside had died. Even the bugs had gone quiet. He looked at the envelope in his hands. Not wages. Not savings. This was drug money. Dirty money. Which meant whoever it was meant for, they would come looking. Zeca handed the envelope back to Rosa. "Hide it again. Deep." She did, folding it back into her cloth and hugging it tight against her chest. Zeka shifted in his seat and adjusted the rear view. The road stretched behind them like a throat. They weren't just running from abandonment anymore. Now they were running from something much worse. As long as I'm breathing, you're not alone. They slept parked off a dirt spur hidden behind a thicket of scrub and crooked trees that leaned like old men in the wind. Zeka stayed in the driver's seat, one arm crossed over his chest, the other resting on his thigh, fingers close to the blade tucked in his door panel. He didn't close his eyes, not all the way. Every rustle outside, every shift in the engine's cooling pipes kept his ears sharp. The envelope haunted him, not just because of what was in it, but because of who might come looking. The money wasn't wrapped neat like it came from a bank. It had weight grime and secrets. Whatever it was connected to Zeka knew it meant danger, and the girl had touched it with the innocence only a child could afford taking it because she thought they might need it, not knowing that money like that didn't come free, didn't come without shadows. Dawn came in slowly, a red smear across the horizon. Birds woke. Bugs started buzzing again, lazy in the early light. Zeka rubbed his eyes and looked back. Joao was curled protectively around Rosa, both asleep under a dusty blanket Zeka had thrown over them. Rosa still had the bundle cradled to her chest, like it was a baby. He hated waking them, but time was against them. He turned the key gently. The truck coughed once, then came alive. Joao jerked awake, eyes alert. No panic, just calculation, like a soldier waking up in the field. Easy, Zeka said. Just getting ahead of the heat. Joao looked at Rosa, then nodded. They were back on the road before the sun cleared the tops of the trees. Zeka handed Joao half a stale granola bar. Eat. Joao took it, split it, and gave the larger piece to Rosa, who was just starting to stir. Zeka kept his voice steady. I've got a delivery to make in Teresina. After that, we'll figure out next steps. What kind of steps? Joao asked. The kind that don't end with us being hunted down. Rosa leaned forward, peeking over the dashboard. Are we being hunted? Zeka didn't lie. Maybe. Depends who that money belonged to. I'm sorry. Rosa said quietly. Zeka shook his head. You didn't do anything wrong. You tried to protect your brother. That's brave. That's smart. Rosa leaned against Joao again, and the boy wrapped an arm around her shoulder. Zeka glanced at them, then back at the road. Let's do something else smart. Tell me the rest of the story. Joao looked unsure. You don't have to share every detail. Just enough so I understand what kind of storm we're in. Joao sighed, then started slowly. Ademir was angry all the time. My mom, she didn't talk much when he was around, only whispered. He worked nights sometimes, and sometimes he'd disappear for days. But when he came back, he always had cash, a lot of it, and he'd throw it on the table and tell her to be grateful. Zeka nodded. He'd seen this pattern before, not just in stories. Once João continued, I walked in and he was stuffing money into that envelope. He didn't see me, but I remembered where he put it. Under the bed inside a pair of boots. When Rosa was looking for her teddy, she found it by accident. Rosa nodded solemn. Did he hit your mom? Yes, João said. When she asked questions. Zeka's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He kept his foot steady on the pedal. He wanted to curse, to punch the dashboard, but rage wouldn't help them. Not yet. He exhaled slowly. You ever see him with anyone else, men? He brought around. Joao thought for a moment. A couple. One had a scar on his cheek and drove a black pickup. I think they fought. I saw him give Adamir a box once. Adamir was nervous. Drugs, Zeka asked. Maybe. It smelled funny. Zeka nodded to himself. That confirmed it. The money wasn't just from bad deals, it was dirty. Street dirty. And now it was in the hands of 2 kids and a man with no backup. He made a decision. They needed somewhere safe, somewhere to regroup and figure out what came next. Somewhere off the road. He knew just the place. They drove through the morning, passing a couple of small farmsteads and goats wandering the road. The sun climbed fast, and by mid-morning it was a hammer in the sky. Dust coated the windshield. Zeka finally spotted the sign he'd been looking for: weathered paint flaking. He turned off the main road onto a rough path. "Where are we going?" Joao asked. "To someone I trust." They bounced along for almost 15 minutes through overgrown brush until a small house appeared half hidden behind a wall of cacti and mango trees. The house was old, but solid adobe walls with a tin roof. A wooden porch held several clay pots, and smoke curled lazily from a chimney in back. Zeka parked, cut the engine. A dog barked twice but didn't approach, just watched from under the shade of a porch chair. Then the door opened. An old woman stepped out, barefoot, gray hair tied back, long skirt brushing the floor. She looked at Zeka and squinted. "You look like hell." "Morning to you too, Donna Sebastiana." She walked closer. Her eyes landed on the kids. The frown on her face softened. "These yours?" Zeka looked down. "Not by blood." "By choice, then?" He nodded. "Good," she said. "Choice is stronger than blood." Joao and Rosa stayed close to the truck, unsure. Zeka crouched down beside them. "This is Donna Sebastiana. She's safe. Years ago, she saved my life. Kept me from bleeding out when my truck flipped near the canyon. She won't hurt you." Rosa took a step forward first. Joao followed. Inside, the house smelled of herb soap and coffee. Donna Sebastiana served food before they could even ask: tapioca with cheese and mango slices. Rosa devoured hers without speaking. Joao ate slower, eyes roaming the walls, clocking exits. Zeka noticed, trusted it. After they finished, Sebastiana pulled Zeka aside into the kitchen. "You running from something, I'm running with something," he corrected. 2 little someones, and maybe a bag of trouble. She poured him coffee. "You trust them with my life." "Then rest here," she said. "Let them breathe. Children need more than survival." Zeka looked over his shoulder at Joao, who was finally letting his shoulders drop, and Rosa, who was giggling softly at the dog licking her hand. He looked back at Sebastiana. "They're not safe." "No one is," she said. "But here they're safer than on the road." Zeka sat, finally letting himself lean back in the chair. "I'm gonna need help," he said. "I've got herbs and courage," Sebastiana said. "You'll need both." He took a sip of coffee. "I also need to make a call. Quiet line. Someone who can help me figure out what this money's tied to." She nodded. "Use the one in the back room. Landline still works." Outside, Rosa's laughter lifted again. Light, clear, the kind that children make when they forget the world is broken. Zeka listened to it like a man who hadn't heard music in years. And for the first time since the bench, he let himself hope. Just a little. Coincidence is just the pretty name fear gives to fate. Zeka hung up the phone with a click that felt final. Tiao's voice still rang in his ears. "You need to get out ahead of this. If it's Adamir's, they'll come fast, and they won't care who's in the way." He knew that already, but hearing it said out loud made it hit differently. He stood in Sebastiana's back room for a moment, staring at the old rotary phone like it might ring again with better news. He stepped back into the main room. The scent of lunch filled the house beans garlic, something frying. Rosa was sitting cross-legged on the floor with Sebastiana's mutt giggling as it tried to lick her face. João sat on the porch steps, staring out across the fields with narrowed eyes, hands clenched. Zeca stepped beside him. Você viu alguma coisa? João didn't answer at first. Then achou que tinha uma caminhonete escura parada na estrada. Sumiu depois. Zeca's jaw tightened. He crouched next to the boy. You did right to watch. You always watch. But you don't act unless I say so. Tá bom, I won't let anything happen to either of you. João glanced at him, doubt flickering behind his tired eyes. Zeca didn't flinch. I mean it. I don't break promises. A moment passed, then João nodded. Barely. Zeca stood and walked back inside. Dona Sebastiana didn't ask for details. She never did. But her eyes met his as she stirred the beans. How bad enough to leave tonight? She didn't try to convince him otherwise, just ladled the food into bowls and placed them on the table. The children ate with surprising calm. Rosa even hummed a little as she chewed, the way kids do when they're full for the first time in a while. Zeca watched them both as he swallowed his food, barely tasting it. His thoughts churned louder than his stomach. They packed after eating. Sebastiana handed him a satchel with bread-dried meat, 2 water flasks, and something wrapped in cloth. What's this? He asked. For fever, she said. Just in case. He nodded. Thank you. She looked past him to the children. The boy's too quiet. That silence will crack if you don't give it a place to rest. Zeca placed a hand over hers. I'll try. As the sun dipped low, they loaded into the truck and pulled away from the safe house. Rosa waved to the dog, who barked once and chased the dust trail for a few meters before giving up. João kept glancing behind them until Sebastiana's land vanished behind a curve. The road back to Mateiros was quiet. Too quiet. Zeca's eyes swept the horizon, nerves buzzing under his skin. The landscape was open scrub, long, flat lines broken by sudden hills, the kind of terrain where you could spot trouble coming if it wasn't already behind you. They rolled into Mateiros under the early evening light. Zeca needed 2 things: fuel and a moment to think. He pulled into a station at the edge of town. A small building, 2 ancient pumps, and a man asleep in a plastic chair under a corrugated roof. Zeca stepped out, nodded at the attendant, and paid in cash. While the tank filled, he turned toward the small cafe next door. He could see through the window yellow plastic chairs, a cracked Coca-Cola fridge, and a few men hunched over plates of food. Ordinary. Too ordinary. Until he saw the face. It was a flash at first, then clear. Adamir. Hair shorter, beard trimmed. But it was him. Sitting near the window fork, paused mid-air, eyes scanning the room with the lazy confidence of a man who believed he had time to kill. Zeca didn't move, didn't show anything, but his mind lit up like a siren. João saw him too. The boy had been watching the building from inside the truck. His lips moved silently, ele. Zeca closed the gas cap, slowly nodded once to the attendant, and climbed back in the cab. His hands didn't shake, but his stomach turned. Out the back, João whispered. Yeah, Zeca said. He turned the key. The engine started quiet. He pulled around the side of the building behind the cafe, then down a narrow alley that ran between 2 walls of overgrown bush. The truck brushed against branches, scraping the paint. He didn't breathe until they cleared the alley and were back on the open road. Dust kicked up behind them. He didn't care. He hit the gas. Rosa was curled against her door again, clutching her bundle. João leaned forward. "He saw us," Nozeka said. "But he's close. And that means the others are too." The truck surged forward down the open stretch, wheels grinding into the road like a war drum. The sun dipped faster now, casting the world in copper and fire. Zeka kept one eye on the mirrors, one hand near the emergency brake. His instincts were screaming, not just about Adamir, about everything. That man didn't work alone. Never had. He had company before, João said, voice tight. One guy with a scar, another with glasses and a limp. Zeka nodded. "We don't wait for introductions." The road curved sharply near a dry ravine. Zeka knew this stretch well enough to drive it half-blind if needed. He kept the speed steady. Behind them in the mirror dust, headlights, coming fast. Zeka didn't think. He shifted gears and floored it. "Hold on," João pulled Rosa close. She gripped his arm without a sound. The truck roared down the slope and up again, metal groaning with every bump. The road narrowed, flanked by two hills. No room to turn, no room to stop. Behind them, the black pickup emerged through the dust. No plates, just speed. Zeka took the next turn, hard tires shrieking. One wheel caught the edge of a rut and lifted for half a second before slamming back down. They reached a narrow bridge, old wooden, barely held together. Zeka didn't slow. They hit the planks with a crash and thundered across. Behind them, the black truck swerved, hit the edge wrong, clipped the railing, and slammed into the side. Metal shrieked. Glass flew. Zeka didn't look back. He drove another 2 kilometers before pulling off the road, heart-pounding hands slick on the wheel. He killed the engine and listened. Silence. No engines. No tires. Just wind. João finally exhaled. "Did we lose them?" Rosa asked. "For now," Zeka said. "But it's not over." The night came in fast. Zeka stepped out, scanned the tree line, and pulled the rifle from behind the seat. He'd kept it there for years, never used, just in case. Well, this was the case. He looked at the kids. "I need you two to stay close. No questions, no noise. If I say run, you run." João nodded. Rosa did too, slowly, clutching her cloth like a lifeline. Zeka looked at the dark road behind them. He'd thought this was just a rescue, but this was a war. And now it was personal. You don't get to choose what haunts you, but you can choose who you protect from it. The stars were sharp enough to cut skin. The sky stretched endlessly above them, black and wide and silent, and the only sound in the darkness was the slow ticking of the truck's engine cooling off. Zeka stood just outside the cab, rifle slung low across his back boots planted in red dirt. He scanned the ridgeline again, even though he'd already done it twice. Still no movement. Still no headlights. But that didn't mean he trusted the quiet. He'd learned a long time ago, silence was never peace. It was just the breath before the gunfire. Behind him inside the truck, Rosa slept curled on the seat, arms wrapped around her bundle like it could stop bullets. João stayed awake, sitting upright, eyes trained on Zeka like he was waiting to be told what to do. The boy didn't flinch anymore. He didn't look for comfort. He looked for tactics. Zeka opened the passenger door and climbed in. "We're gonna rest here for a few hours. Not ideal, but we can't risk the main roads until daylight. They'll be watching them." João nodded. "Okay." Zeka studied him. "You sleep at all?" The boy shook his head. Zeka reached behind the seat and pulled out a folded blanket. Lie down next to your sister. I'll keep watch. Joao hesitated. What if they come back? They won't catch us off guard again. I promise. The word hung heavy in the air. Promise. Joao stared at him like he was weighing whether that word still meant anything. Then, without a word, he eased down beside Rosa and pulled the blanket over them both. Zeka sat in the driver's seat and laid the rifle across his lap. His eyes stayed fixed on the hills. The old fear began to creep back, the fear he thought he'd buried years ago. He'd made mistakes before. Big ones. That time in Barreiras when he ignored the signs and a man died for it. Or the cargo job in Palmas where he said yes to the wrong client and ended up hunted across 3 states. But this was different. This wasn't about pride, or money, or running from his own mess. This time, it was about the 2 kids in the back seat. He wasn't carrying cargo. He was carrying lives. The wind picked up a little after midnight, dry and warm. It whistled through the brush and rattled the truck mirrors. Zeka's fingers tightened on the rifle. He couldn't stop the thoughts from circling. What if they couldn't outrun this? What if the men coming for them had connections, government, police? It wouldn't be the first time dirty money bought clean uniforms. He closed his eyes for just a moment, breathing deep. When he opened them again, something shifted in the corner of his vision. A figure. Small. Zeka turned fast hand on the rifle, then froze. Rosa. She stood barefoot on the ground, holding her bundle, eyes wide and full of something heavier than any child should carry. Zeka eased out of the truck. Hey. You okay? She didn't speak, just looked up at him, bottom lip trembling. He knelt down slowly. You have a bad dream. She nodded, and then after a long pause, he used to come in the night, when Mamai was asleep. Zeka's blood chilled. Joao never knew. I didn't want him to. Zeka's hands curled into fists against the ground, the dirt biting his skin. He said I had to keep quiet, she whispered, or he'd leave us both on the road. Zeka swallowed hard. You're safe now. You hear me, Rosa? No one's touching you again. Ever. She nodded again. Then just as quietly, I believe you. She stepped forward and leaned into his chest. He wrapped his arms around her small frame, holding her close as she buried her face against his shirt. She didn't cry. She just breathed slow and shaking, like she was finally exhaling something that had been trapped inside her for years. They stayed like that for a long time. When he carried her back into the truck, Joao was sitting up alert again. Zeka met his eyes and nodded once. She's okay. Joao's gaze softened. He helped Zeka settle Rosa between them, tucking the blanket around her. Zeka kept his hand on the rifle and his back against the door, watching the darkness creep by in slow inches. They drove out before dawn, just as the stars began to fade and the first gray light broke over the hills. Zeka kept off the main road, sticking to the service trails used by locals and delivery trucks. He knew these paths, roads nobody bothered to map, where news traveled slower and secrets could breathe. Joao didn't ask where they were going. He just watched. Always watching. After an hour, Zeka finally spoke. We're going to see a friend. Someone who knows people. Not cops, real people. People who help. Joao didn't react, but his posture changed. Just slightly. A flicker of hope buried under survival instinct. They reached the outskirts of a tiny village, barely more than a crossroads. A school. A bakery. A clinic with a sign that swung in the wind. Zeka pulled the truck around to the back of a small church. An old man swept the steps in silence, white beard to his chest, hands worn from decades of work. He looked up as they parked, then smiled. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Zeca Ramos. Thought you were dead." "Not yet, Padre Luis. You look half dead. Been a long few days." The priest nodded, then looked at the children. "Yours. They are now." Padre Luis didn't ask for more, just stepped aside and motioned toward the rear entrance. Inside the church was cool and clean. Simple wood pews, whitewashed walls, no gold, no distractions. "Put them in the side room," the priest said. "They can rest. I'll make some food." Zeca helped Rosa and João settle on a padded bench in the small side room. They were asleep before he even shut the door. Back in the sanctuary, Zeca stood with Padre Luis by the altar. "They're being hunted," Zeca said, "by men with more reach than they should have." The priest poured him a glass of water. "What did you get yourself into now, meu filho?" "I got into something worth staying in." Padre Luis studied him for a long time. "You're serious?" "I am." "Well," the old man said, "then let's see if redemption comes with an escape plan." Zeca drank the water. "And maybe a clean ID." The priest chuckled. "One miracle at a time." Outside, the wind was picking up again, and this time it carried the sound of wheels. Sometimes to do the right thing, you have to become the kind of person you never wanted to be. The sound of wheels on gravel wasn't a hallucination. Zeca didn't move. Not yet. He just stared out the narrow stained glass window at the corner of the chapel, where light sliced in angled patterns across the floor. The rumble got louder, slow, deliberate, too smooth to be farm equipment, too patient to be lost tourists. Padre Luis came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. How many? Zeca didn't blink. One truck, maybe two. Rolling slow. The priest gave a sharp nod and turned down the hall without a word. Zeca crossed the room in 3 steps and opened the side door. João sat up instantly, his eyes snapping awake like they'd been open the whole time. Rosa stirred beside him. "They're here," Zeca said. João didn't ask how he knew. He just slipped off the bench and pulled on his shoes. "Where do we go?" "Nowhere." "Not yet." "We wait for the priest." Rosa rubbed her eyes. "Do we run again?" Zeca crouched in front of her. "Not this time, Pequena. This time they're walking into our space." Padre Luis reappeared holding a set of keys and a small black pouch. "There's a crawl space under the confessional. Lead them through the storeroom and down the hatch. They'll be safe there." Zeca took the pouch. "What's this?" the priest smirked. "Insurance." He disappeared again without waiting for thanks. Zeca turned to the kids. "Stay close. Stay quiet. Follow me." He led them through the narrow halls past worn pews and saints whose painted eyes looked like they'd seen too much. Behind the altar, a side door opened into a cramped storeroom filled with boxes labeled in fading ink donations, rice blankets. Zeca pushed a stack aside, revealing a trap door beneath. He yanked it open. A musty draft rose up. Dirt, old wood, spiderwebs. "Go," he told João. The boy didn't hesitate. He helped Rosa down the ladder, then followed. Zeca paused just long enough to close the hatch and slide a crate over the top. Then he stepped back into the chapel. The truck pulled up outside. Zeca kept the rifle close barrel tucked just out of view behind the altar. The door creaked open. 3 men entered. 2 wore civilian clothes, jeans, boots, tight-fitting shirts. One of them had the limp Joao had described. The third wore a local police uniform. Zeka exhaled slowly. The lead man with the limp smiled wide. "Peace be with you, brother." Zeka stepped forward from behind the pulpit, expression blank. "And also with you. You the caretaker here?" "Just a traveler," Zeka replied. The second man, bigger shaved head, thick neck, looked around the chapel like he was measuring exit routes. "Funny thing," Limp said. "We're looking for some missing kids, boy and a girl. Been real sad what happened to their mother." Zeka tilted his head. "Missing, you said? Tragic," the cop chimed in, fake smile plastered across his sunburned face. "You see any children around here?" Zeka kept his body loose. "This is a church. Lot of people pass through." "Uh-huh." Limp stepped closer. "You mind if we take a look around?" "Do, actually," Zeka said, his voice sharpening just enough. "You got a warrant?" The cop took a step forward. "I think you misunderstand. This is a public building. We're just doing our civic duty." Zeka raised his chin. "And I'm doing mine, protecting a sanctuary. You want to trample holy ground, you better come with more than lies." The cop's hand drifted toward his belt. Zeka didn't move. "Don't." They locked eyes. Then the priest's voice echoed from the back hall. "Brothers, I suggest you take your business elsewhere." Padre Luis walked in slow, wearing his cassock like armor, his hand raised in quiet defiance. "This man is under my protection, and this house belongs to God, not to thugs with badges." Limp scoffed. "You're going to interfere with law enforcement." "Old man, I've interfered with worse," the priest said calmly. "And unlike you, I sleep well." Tension stretched in the room, tight and brittle. Zeka's fingers twitched toward the rifle behind the altar, but didn't lift it yet. "You've got 2 minutes," Padre Luis said, voice cold as stone. "After that, I call every reporter, bishop, and activist from here to Brasilia." Limp's jaw tensed. "You made your point." He turned, motioned to the other two. "Let's go." They walked out, slow backs straight, trying not to look like they'd just been outplayed by an old man in sandals. Zeka waited until the engine started and pulled away. Only then did he breathe. The priest turned to him. "They'll be back, I know. You have to move tonight. I know that too." They opened the hatch and Joao helped Rosa back up. Her face was pale, streaked with dirt. She clutched Zeka's pant leg without saying a word. Joao's jaw was tight. They had a cop. Not the last one we'll see. Zeka turned to Padre Luis. "You said you knew people who help." The priest gave him a nod. "There's a woman. Goes by Lena. Works with families crossing borders. She doesn't ask questions. If anyone can get you out clean, it's her. We're Alto Paraíso." Zeka ran a hand through his hair. "That's 3 days if we're lucky." "She'll wait," Luis said. "But she won't wait forever." Zeka looked at the kids. Rosa had gone quiet again. Too quiet. He knelt in front of her. "You did good. Stayed brave. Just a little more okay?" She nodded. Didn't speak. Zeka touched Joao's shoulder. "You too." Joao looked away. "I should have done more." "You did enough," Zeka said. "You kept her safe. That's what matters." They left just after nightfall. The priest gave them a satchel of food, a map, and a burner phone with one number saved, Lena. He hugged Zeka like a brother and whispered something in his ear that Zeka didn't repeat. They drove fast, but not reckless. Avoided main roads, hugged the shadows. When they stopped at a creek to refill water, Zeka caught Joao skipping stones across the water. "How you holding up?" Joao shrugged. "I don't get scared easy." "I don't believe you," Zeka said. Joao cracked a smile. "Okay, I get scared, but I don't freeze." Zeka smiled back. "Good." Joao stared at the horizon. "You really think this Lena person can help?" Zeka looked out into the trees. "I think she's our best shot." Joao skipped another stone. It bounced twice, then sank. "What if she doesn't want us?" Zeka didn't answer right away. Then firmly, "I want you." "That's not changing." Joao didn't respond. But that night when they slept in the back of the truck, Rosa curled up against Zeka for the first time, and Joao, without a word, rested his head just beside her shoulder. Zeka didn't sleep much, but for the first time he let himself hope they might make it to morning. Fear teaches you how to run. Love teaches you where to run too. The rain started just before noon, thin at first, then thick and heavy like the sky couldn't hold itself together anymore. It fell in long sheets across the windshield, turning the red dirt road into soup. Zeka leaned forward, squinting past the streaking wipers, both hands tight on the wheel. The road wound through a stretch of cerrado so remote, even birds seemed to think twice before nesting there. The truck slipped once, fishtailing near a bend. Joao gripped the edge of the seat, but didn't make a sound. Rosa let out a small gasp, then bit her lip, and leaned back into Joao's side. She hadn't let go of her cloth bundle in over a day. Zeka's jaw worked quietly. He didn't speak, didn't curse, just corrected the wheel and kept driving. They had 2 days to reach Alto Paraíso. Lena was waiting if she was still there. Behind them, the world might have still been burning. Zeka didn't know if the limp man or the fake cop had followed, but his gut told him they weren't done yet. Men like that didn't take losses lightly. They regrouped. They hunted smarter. The rain came harder. Up ahead, a washed-out crossing waited like a trap. The old bridge had given up sometime in the past few years, replaced by a shallow, rocky stream, normally drivable, now a churning flood. Zeka pulled the truck to a stop just shy of the edge. Water rushed past, brown and wild, full of snapped branches and garbage. Joao leaned forward. "We can't cross that." Zeka didn't answer right away. He stepped out into the rain boots, sinking into the mud. He walked to the edge, watched the water surge, and calculated. Depth, flow, risk. Rosa climbed down beside him, barefoot cloth bundle clutched to her chest. "Too dangerous," she said, her voice soft, but certain. He looked down at her. "I know." She didn't move. "Get back in the truck, Pequena." She hesitated. "Is this where we stop?" He crouched down, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "No. This is where we think." Joao joined them now, soaked to the bone. "There's a service road. Back about 2 kilometers. It cuts east, might loop around." "You sure I remember the sign?" Said Fazenda do Vale. Zeka nodded. "Let's try it." They turned the truck around, tires slipping, and backtracked through the mud. The road narrowed, overgrown, and wild. A faded wooden sign pointed east, barely legible under the moss. Fazenda do Vale, 4 kilometers. They followed it in silence, wipers groaning with every pass. The truck bumped and skidded over rocks and shallow gullies, but it held. Eventually, the road split again, one path curving up toward higher ground, the other disappearing into a tunnel of dense trees. Zeka stopped. Joao spoke first. "High road's safer, but slower." Zeka looked at the lower path. More cover, more risk. They chose the low road. The trail narrowed further, trees crowding the sides. Branches scraped the truck like nails on a coffin. The rain slowed but didn't stop, and the mud turned the path slick. Then they saw it. Smoke. Just a wisp curling over the treetops. Zeka eased the truck to a stop and cut the engine. Nobody spoke. He rolled down the window and listened. A crackle. Voices. Distant, but not far. "Get down," he said. "Both of you." João grabbed Rosa and pulled her low. Zeka stepped out, rifle slung over his shoulder boots, quiet against the mud. He crept forward along the tree line, heart hammering in his chest. Through the branches he saw a small clearing. A lean-to shelter made from tarps and branches. A campfire. Two men crouched beside it, rifles slung across their backs, speaking in low tones. One of them had a limp. Zeka's stomach turned. He backed up slow and careful, keeping his breath shallow. When he got to the truck, João was already sitting up. "It's him," Zeka whispered. "They got ahead of us somehow." João's face went hard. "What do we do?" "We don't go through them." He started the engine, quietly. They reversed 100 meters, then cut into the brush. It wasn't a road, but the truck could handle it for now. They moved slow, tires chewing through vines and branches, every bump a jolt to the ribs. Rosa looked up at Zeka. How'd they know Zeka didn't answer? But the question burned. There was only one way the men could have beaten them there, someone had told them. Maybe the priest had been watched. Maybe Lena's name was already out there. Or maybe someone in this rotten country had sold out 3 fugitives for a quick payday. He tightened his grip on the wheel. They cleared the brush and emerged onto a ridge overlooking the valley below. The rain had lifted slightly, just enough to see Alto Paraíso in the distance, a patch of gray and red rooftops cradled in green hills. Zeka exhaled. "We're close." But distance didn't mean safety. They stopped just outside the valley to rest. João helped start a small fire using damp sticks and the dry kindling Zeka kept stashed under the seat. Rosa sat beside it, arms wrapped around her knees. Zeka watched her for a long time. "Tell me what's in the bundle," he said. Rosa looked up. Then slowly she unwrapped it. Inside the envelope. Of course. But also a photograph. Old creased. A woman with long black hair smiling in a field. 2 kids beside her. Rosa and João. A 3rd child in her arms, a baby. Zeka stared. "You have another sibling." Rosa nodded. "His name was Mateus. He died." "Fever." João's voice was low. Ademir wouldn't take him to a doctor. Zeka looked at the photo again. The mother's eyes were soft, full of love. So unlike the story he'd been told. "She tried," Rosa said. "She tried to protect us. I believe you." They sat in silence, the fire popping softly. Then João asked, "When we get to Alto Paraíso, what happens?" Zeka didn't lie. "I don't know. We find Lena. We ask for help. After that, we make choices." João nodded. "You'll stay with us," Zeka looked him dead in the eye. "Unless you tell me to go." João didn't answer. But later, when they packed up, he handed Zeka the photograph without a word. A kind of trust. A silent vow. As they climbed back into the truck and rolled toward the last stretch, Zeka couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting ahead. Not death, but something harder. Something like a decision. And the road behind them was gone. Some doors don't open. You kick them down or walk away, but you can't wait forever. Alto Paraíso sat like a secret between the green folds of mountain and cloud, a place that looked too peaceful to ever know violence. Red-tiled roofs baked in the sun, dogs lounged under porches, and eucalyptus trees swayed as if the world was still safe. But Zeka knew better. A pretty place was just as likely to kill you as a hard one. He parked the truck on the far edge of town beside a crumbling stone wall wrapped in vines. From there, it was all on foot. Less visible, less noise, less chance of leaving a trail someone could follow. João climbed down first, already scanning the street, like he'd done it his whole life. Rosa followed, clutching her bundle close. She hadn't spoken much since showing them the photo. Whatever weight she carried now had sunk deeper into her chest. Zeka checked the slip of paper Padre Luis had given him, Rua das Andorinhas number 38. Ask for Lena, say you're from Luis. The street wasn't far. Just a short walk past the bus depot and a cafe that smelled of burnt sugar and strong coffee. Rosa slowed as they passed, peering through the window at a tray of pastries. Zeka made a mental note when this was over, if there was still time he'd buy her one. They turned onto Rua das Andorinhas. Small houses lined both sides, most with painted fences and pots of flowers crowding the steps. Number 38 sat behind a turquoise gate with peeling paint. A parrot in a bamboo cage squawked as they approached. Zeka opened the gate and stepped up to the door. He knocked once, then twice. No answer. He knocked again. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. The door creaked open to reveal a woman in her late 40s, her hair cut short, eyes sharp and lined from years of watching people lie. You, Lena, Zeka asked. Who's asking? Louise sent me. She narrowed her eyes. From the church, yeah. She looked past him at the kids, then back at his face. You didn't bring trouble, did you? I brought truth, Zeka said. And maybe a storm behind it. She stepped aside. Get in. Inside the house was small but clean. Bare walls, wooden floor, a fan buzzing in the corner. She led them through the kitchen to a back room with a sofa and 2 chairs. No photos, no clutter. Rosa sat on the sofa without being asked. João stayed standing. Lena poured a glass of water and handed it to Rosa, then turned to Zeka. So tell me. He didn't give her the long version, just the important parts. Adamir, the abuse, the money, the chase, the photo, the envelope. When he finished, she sat back in her chair, legs crossed, arms folded. I know the name. Adamir used to run things out of Palmas. Dirty cash, dirty hands. One of his runners turned up dead 2 months ago in a sugarcane ditch. Zeka nodded. I figured it wasn't just family drama. She eyed him. What's your stake in this? I picked up 2 kids on a bench. I could have kept driving. I didn't. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. They sat in silence for a beat. Then Lena said, I can get them out. New IDs, new home. It'll take time. Money. Zeka opened his bag, pulled out the envelope Rosa had carried for days. He handed it to her. She raised an eyebrow. You sure wouldn't be here if I wasn't. She counted quickly, her fingers moving fast. When she finished, she tucked it away and stood. I'll make the call. You've got a window, maybe 24 hours before they realize you're here. After that, I can't guarantee anything. Where do we stay? There's a safe house up the hill. Empty this week. You'll be ghosts. She handed him a key wrapped in a scrap of cloth. Numbers scratched on the back. Zeka took it. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. It gets worse before it gets better. The house was smaller than expected. 1 room, no electricity, but it had thick walls and a hidden rear exit that led into the trees. Zeka checked the perimeter before letting the kids inside. Rosa curled up on the mat near the wall, clutching the photo, this time not the cloth. João stood by the window, keeping watch. "You can sleep, you know," Zeka told him. "I know." Zeka sat by the door rifle across his lap. For the first time since Teresina, he let his shoulders drop just a little. But it didn't last. Near midnight, João shook him awake. "Truck," the boy whispered, "down the road. Lights off." Zeka stood, heart racing. He stepped outside, keeping to the shadows. The air was thick, heavy with damp leaves and the scent of pine. Down the slope, two figures stood near the gate, barely visible through the fog. Then one of them whistled. Zeka recognized the sound. It was a hunting signal. He ducked back inside. "Pack your things. We're leaving. Now." João moved fast. Rosa didn't cry, just grabbed her photo and shoes. Zeka pushed open the back exit and led them into the brush. No trail, just instinct. They hiked for over an hour, winding through roots and mud until they reached the edge of a cliff overlooking a dried riverbed. They stopped to breathe. João looked at him. Where now, Zeka pulled out the phone Lena had given him and dialed. She answered on the second ring. "I know. They hit the safe house. I have a second route. Head south toward Morro da Lua. There's a cave. GPS won't reach there. I'll meet you in the morning with the papers. How long do we wait?" "Until the sun clears the ridge. If I'm not there by then, go without me." The line clicked dead. Zeka pocketed the phone. He looked at the kids. Their faces were pale but steady. No fear left, just exhaustion and something harder. Something like survival. He led them down into the riverbed and found the cave Lena had described half hidden behind hanging roots and crumbling rock. Inside it was dry, narrow, and silent. They huddled together in the dark, no fire, no food, just silence and breathing. João leaned against Zeka's arm and asked the question that had been building for days. "Why us?" Zeka looked at him, really looked. "Because someone should have come for you sooner." He wrapped his arm around João, pulled Rosa close, and waited for the light. Even in the dark, there are things worth walking toward. The cave was cold. Rosa trembled beside Zeka, curled against his chest, the old photo still clutched in her hands like a lifeline. João sat against the wall, knees to his chest, arms wrapped tight around them. His eyes weren't closed, but he wasn't fully awake either. He was holding himself in the way kids do when they've learned too much, too young. The first light crept in slowly. Zeka kept his ears sharp for movement. No tires, no branches cracking, just the slow rising of wind through the trees and the low buzz of insects coming back to life. The sun breached the ridge, spilling gold over the rocks. She wasn't there. Not yet. Zeka checked his watch again. 23 minutes past sunrise. His fingers tightened around the burner phone. No signal. Not even a flicker. João stood without a word, stretching stiff legs. He didn't ask. He was watching Zeka's face, measuring the silence. "She's not coming," he said flatly. "We don't know that," Zeka replied, but his voice lacked weight. João stepped to the mouth of the cave and looked out toward the slope. Maybe they got her. Maybe she never planned to show. "She's not like them," Zeka said. Rosa stirred, mumbling something in her sleep. Zeka looked down at her, heart nodding. He stood, walked out into the clearing and scanned the trees. Nothing but wind and light. He'd been in too many places like this before, dead ends painted to look like promises. Back in Tocantins, a man once offered him a clean start in exchange for one final delivery. Zeka had believed him. That deal ended in gunfire and 2 dead friends. But this felt different. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the envelope Lena had handed back to him just before they'd left her house. Taped to the back was a note. 2 words scribbled in pencil. Trust late. He wasn't sure if it was a warning or advice. Maybe both. He turned toward João. We give her until 10, and if she's not here, then we run. João nodded once. Okay. Time crawled. Zeca tried to keep the kids distracted. He told Rosa a story about a blind mule he once drove through a thunderstorm outside Barreiras. She giggled just once, and that was enough. João listened without reacting, but Zeca could see it the way he relaxed, even just a little. At 9:53, a sound. Tires. Far off. Steady. Not fast. Zeca moved first hand on the rifle eyes, scanning the ridge. A gray hatchback came into view, bouncing along the dirt trail. It pulled up near the clearing, then stopped. One figure stepped out. Lena. She didn't wave, didn't smile. Just stood with a black duffel bag slung over her shoulder and an expression carved from stone. Zeca lowered the rifle but didn't let it go. She approached, eyes flicking to the kids, then back to him. You still trust slow, I trust tired. She opened the bag. Inside were 2 sets of papers. IDs, birth certificates, health records. She handed him a sealed envelope. Bus tickets. Sao Paulo. Name on them is Oliveira. You're now their uncle. You've got 3 days before the documents expire. After that, it gets harder. Zeca took them, heart beating slow and heavy. João stepped forward. What about him? He gestured toward Zeca. Lena shook her head. He's not in the system. Not officially. Not anymore. So what happens to him? Zeca answered for her. I'll figure it out. Lena looked at him. There's more. Zeca braced himself. They found the priest. Last night. Raided the chapel. He was gone, thank God, but they took everything. Files. Photos. That envelope you left. Zeca cursed under his breath. They're moving faster now, she said. Word is, Adamir's brother is putting heat on every town between here and the border. The kids are valuable. Zeca glanced at João and Rosa. They're not products. I know that, Lena said. But men like him don't care. They only see leverage. She closed the bag. You need to leave. Now. Zeca looked at Rosa. She stood barefoot in the cave, mouth light on her face, the photo now tucked safely inside her new jacket pocket. She was ready. He looked at João. The boy gave a small nod. Then Zeca turned to Lena. How far will they chase? As far as they need to, she said. But you have something they don't. What's that? She pointed at Rosa, then João. A reason. Zeca reached into his coat and handed Lena the burner phone. If anything happens, anything, you call me. She hesitated, then took it. Be safe. They left the cave on foot, moving quickly through the trees until they reached a smaller trail Lena had marked on the map. An hour later, they boarded a rattling bus headed toward Brasília. From there, they'd change again, papers, names, stories. On the bus, Zeca sat between the kids. Rosa leaned against him, already asleep. João stared out the window at the fading trees. What now? He asked. Now we stay quiet, we stay small, and we keep moving. João didn't answer right away. Then, you still got the picture? Zeca pulled it from his coat pocket and handed it over. João looked at it for a long time. I don't remember that day. You don't need to, Zeca said. You just need to remember who she was. João tucked the photo into his shirt pocket. She'd want us to keep going. Zeka placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. She would. The bus rumbled on. Out the window, the world stretched wide and green, dotted with sun and storm. Somewhere down the road, danger still waited. But so did something else. A chance. Zeka let his head fall back, the weight of everything still pressing down, but no longer crushing. He didn't know where they'd land, or who they'd be when they got there. But they were still together, still running, still walking toward the light. Peace doesn't come when the danger passes. It comes when you stop looking over your shoulder. 3 weeks later, Zeka stood behind the counter of a dusty hardware store in a quiet stretch of Sorocaba, wearing a name tag that read Mario, and counting out change for a man buying nails and a padlock. The man left with a nod, the bell above the door jingling on his way out. The store was old, cluttered with shelves of worn tools, the air always tinged with motor oil and sawdust. It didn't ask questions, didn't demand anything from him except showing up on time and keeping the books straight. That was the deal: cash under the table, keep your head down, don't draw attention. Zeka didn't mind. He liked the quiet. He liked the rhythm. And most of all, he liked knowing exactly where the door was and that he could see it from every angle. Across town, João and Rosa were enrolled in a small public school. Lena had arranged it one final favor before disappearing for good. Rosa went by Camila now. João used Lucas. Their birthdays were shifted by a year, their last names changed. They carried their new lives like slightly too big coats, awkward at first, unfamiliar, but warm enough to keep them moving. Rosa had made 2 friends already. She drew in the margins of her notebook trees, rivers, skies filled with birds, and came home chattering about a girl who shared her snack at recess. Zeka pretended not to listen while she talked, but he memorized every word. João was different. He spoke little, smiled less. But he watched everything: classmates, teachers, the layout of the school building. He studied the exits like someone who never wanted to be trapped again. At night, Zeka made dinner in their small apartment above a tailor shop. It wasn't much: 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled like burnt onions, a window that faced a blank brick wall. But it was safe. It was theirs. One night as he stirred beans over the stove, João appeared in the doorway. "Someone followed me today," he said. Zeka turned, spoon still in hand. "Where after school? A guy in a gray car. I saw him at the corner, then again near the bakery." Face João shook his head. "Didn't see it clear." Zeka set the spoon down. "You sure?" João nodded. "I know how to look." Zeka glanced toward Rosa's room where faint music played from a cheap radio. "Okay," he said. "We change routine. Different path to school, different times. And if you see the car again, you come straight home." João hesitated. "Do you think it's them?" Zeka met his eyes. "I think we don't guess. We prepare." That night he didn't sleep. He sat at the window with a pair of binoculars watching the street, just in case. He didn't see a gray car, didn't see anything suspicious. But the feeling was back, that cold pinch in the ribs, the one that came before everything fell apart. The next morning, Zeka walked the kids to school himself, down a different road, past a different bakery. He stood across the street until they vanished into the building, then circled back twice before heading to work. Still nothing. That afternoon, when they returned, Rosa had a drawing clutched in her hands. A tall tree with 3 birds, one big, 2 small, flying from its branches toward a yellow sun. "It's us," she said. "You're the big one." Zeka smiled and taped it to the fridge. He wanted to believe it was over, that they were safe now, that the world had moved on. But 2 days later, Joao didn't come home from school. Zeka got the call from the front office he'd left before dismissal told the teacher he was sick. Never made it back. Zeka was out the door in seconds, heart pounding like a war drum. He checked the usual streets, the bakery, the bus stop. Nothing. Then his phone buzzed. Blocked number. He answered. "Who is this?" A low voice on the other end. "You've been hard to find, Ramos." Zeka went still. "What do you want?" "You know what we want. You took something that doesn't belong to you." "They're not things," Zeka growled. "You're going to get a message. Soon. Don't ignore it." The line went dead. Zeka stood in the middle of the street, the noise of the city pressing around him like water. 10 minutes later, his phone buzzed again, this time a photo. Joao sitting in the back of a car, his face bruised, his eyes wide and unblinking. Zeka doubled over, fury and fear crashing through him in equal waves. Then he straightened and started walking. He made one stop at the hardware store. His boss wasn't there, just a younger man stocking nails. Zeka didn't speak. He walked straight to the back, opened the locked drawer where he kept his bag and pulled it out. Inside was a small handgun, oiled and loaded. He tucked it into the waistband of his jeans. Then he walked home. Rosa was there, sitting on the floor, drawing another tree. He crouched in front of her. "I need you to listen, Pequena. I have to go out for a bit. Just a little while." She looked up. "Where's Joao?" "He's okay," Zeka lied. "I'm going to bring him back." She nodded like she'd already known. Zeka kissed the top of her head, then stood. As he left the apartment, he glanced once at the drawing on the fridge. The sun was higher now, the birds flying farther. He stepped into the street. And this time he wasn't running. Sometimes a man doesn't choose violence, but sometimes it's the only way to end it. Zeka stood outside the warehouse on the edge of the industrial district, the low sun painting the corrugated metal walls in rust and gold. The city had thinned out here. The air smelled like iron and diesel. A dog barked once and then went quiet. He'd followed the trail fast and quiet. A contact of Lena's owed him a favor, an old dock worker who heard things. The man had recognized Joao from the photo. Said he saw him taken in by two men in a gray car parked outside a shipping hub on Rua Norte. The building matched. No sign, no activity, just silence thick enough to choke on. Zeka checked the pistol once more. One in the chamber. 2 spare magazines in his coat pocket. He didn't have body armor, didn't have backup. But he had one thing they didn't. He knew what it meant to lose. And he wasn't going to lose again. He slipped around the side of the building, where a row of broken windows lined a low brick foundation. One had been patched with plywood. The others were just empty frames. He found one wide enough to slide through. Inside the warehouse was dark and stale. A few skylights let in slanted beams of dying light, and dust floated like ash. Boxes lined the far wall. A flicker of motion caught Zeka's eye, then a voice muffled and sharp. He crept forward. Voices echoed from the back near a stack of pallets. He crouched behind a forklift and peered around. Joao sat on a wooden chair, wrists bound in front. His face was bruised, but his eyes were clear. He was staring at the man pacing in front of him. Limp, the same bastard from the chapel. The same cruel smirk twisted on his face. "I don't care what he told you," Limp was saying. "You're just leverage. That's all. Once he shows up, this all ends." Joao didn't speak. The other man, the shaved-headed one Zeka remembered from before, leaned against a crate, cradling a sawed-off shotgun. Zeka measured the distance, 30 feet, maybe less. He didn't wait. He stepped out, raised the gun, and fired once. The bullet struck the shotgun man in the chest. He dropped like a bag of grain, gun clattering beside him. Limp spun, reaching for his sidearm, but Zeka was already moving, charging in a straight line. Limp got the gun out, but didn't fire in time. Zeka tackled him hard. They crashed to the floor. Limp's pistol skittered away. Zeka landed a punch, then another. Blood sprayed. Limp grabbed at Zeka's wrist, twisted, and drove a knee into his ribs. Zeka grunted, rolled off, and scrambled for his pistol. Limp lunged for the chair, pulled it in front like a shield. Zeka didn't fire. Joao was too close. Limp grabbed Joao, dragging him up by the arms. "One step, I shoot him." Zeka froze. He saw the madness in Limp's eyes, cornered, bleeding, desperate. The kind of man who would do something reckless just to keep control. Zeka raised his voice, calm. "You don't want to die here." "Don't tell me what I want," Limp shouted. "You think you get to take my operation, my money, and just walk away with these damn kids? You never owned them. They were mine," Limp screamed. "Everything was mine." Zeka took one step closer. "You're not leaving this building." Limp pulled a knife from his belt and pressed it to Joao's throat. "I'll gut him. Right here." "You think I won't?" Joao didn't flinch. Zeka held his gaze. "You hurt him, you don't get a chance to beg." Limp's grip faltered. Just for a second. It was enough. Joao slammed his heel down on Limp's foot. Limp yelped, staggered. Zeka fired. One shot. Center mass. Limp fell backward, hitting the concrete with a wet thud. His eyes were wide, mouth open in surprise, blood blooming across his chest. Joao stood still for a moment, panting. His hands were still tied. Zeka rushed forward, pulling out his knife to cut the ropes. "You okay?" he asked. Joao nodded. "Yeah." Zeka looked him over. No stab wounds, no broken bones. He let out a shaky breath. They moved fast. Zeka took Limp's pistol, checked the other body. Dead. He kicked the shotgun away and grabbed Joao's arm. "We're not staying." They exited through the back, slipping into the maze of loading docks and alleys behind the warehouse. The sky had turned gray. Rain threatened on the edges of the horizon. They didn't stop moving until they reached the main road. Zeka flagged down a motor taxi, handed over too much cash, and gave an address far across the city, a place he'd prepped weeks ago just in case an old friend's workshop with a back room and a hidden cot. When they arrived, the lights were off, but the key was where it should have been. Inside, Joao sat on the cot. He looked up at Zeka. "Is it over?" Zeka sat beside him. "Not forever. But for now, yeah." Joao stared at his hands. "I was scared. So was I." Joao looked at him, surprised. "Really?" Zeka nodded. "Being scared doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Joao thought about that, then nodded. Zeka stood. "I'm going to make a call. Then we'll eat." He stepped outside, pulled out a burner phone, and dialed the number Lena had buried in the documents. She answered. "Did you find him?" "Yeah." There was a pause. "How bad?" "Bad enough. But he's alive. You need extraction, not yet. Just cover. If anyone comes sniffing around, I want them looking in the wrong direction." "I can do that," she said. "You did good, Zeka." He didn't answer. Back inside, Joao was curled on the cot, half asleep. Zeka sat beside him, the weight of the night settling into his bones. He thought about Rosa, probably asleep under her thin blanket, with her drawings still taped to the wall. He thought about the tree she'd drawn, the birds, 3 of them still flying, and now finally in the right direction.